Hello everyone and welcome back to the FPL Phillips YouTube channel, or welcome to the FPL Phillips YouTube channel if it is your first time watching. My name's Eddie and today I'm bringing to you an FPL video ahead of the 24-25 season, and one that you're probably not going to have seen elsewhere, or at least certainly a team you're not going to have seen elsewhere on YouTube, and that's because I've fit Haaland, Salah, Palmer and Isak all into one draft. I'm considering going with a strategy as well. It's not just one of those drafts where I definitely won't go with it game week 1. I am very much considering it, depending on a few things which we'll talk about as we get into the video. But without any more messing about, let's get into the draft. I'm sure that's what you guys are here for. The goalkeeper, I'm not going to waste your time. It's undecided. The 4.5 million goalkeeper bracket is very much what I'll be going with. It's just rather stacked at the moment, and there are keeper options from a few different teams where there are some sides where there could be two keepers who end up starting, so you don't know which one it's going to be yet, basically. There's Chelsea, there's a few other teams, Crystal Palace notably. It looks like it'll be Henderson, but we don't know for sure, basically. And barring all that, game week 1, nearer the time, I'll make the decision then. And you're just going to have a 4.5 million keeper and then the 4.0 backup in this team. That's all you need to know. Whichever one you go for could be a number of goalkeepers, as mentioned. But we'll get on to who that might be in just a second, because it is kind of tied into how the defence is looking. And the defence in this team, there's not going to be the Vardiols and the Trents that you'll see in maybe some other sides, but it is still got some good assets in it. Don't be misguided by their prices. And I'll show you why just now. We've got Mykolenko, Konsa, Anderson, Robinson in there as 4.5 million defenders. And these guys rotate well. And I think there are such a plethora of options at that price point. You've got Forest defenders, Nico Williams, Murillo. You've got other teams that I couldn't fit it here too. Newcastle have Burn, or if Trippier leaves, Livramento is a fantastic option. There's so many different combinations you can go for and actually get a little bit of decent attacking threat out of as well. So let's have a look at this just to back up my point. We've got some of the ones that I think are more closely locked in. If I've got a 4.5 mil from Palace, it's going to be Anderson. I would love the extra 0.5 to go up to Munoz, but if I can just have one of them, I'm going to have to go with Anderson to save the money in this team. We've then got Robinson at Fulham, who's going to be in there out of the 4.5s, and then Mykolenko, another one with a good attacking threat, who I think will definitely be in here. So you'll see Fulham, Palace and Everton are in each one of these rotation plans that I've generated using the Fantasy Football Fix AI rotation planner tool thing. And then we've also got Barco in there, so Brighton are in each of these as well as the 4.0 million defender. But you could have Harwood Bellis at Southampton in the team as that slot, or you could have both of them, which is the case in the very bottom one of these that you can see right down there at the bottom of your screen. So there's a good set of fixtures you can get here. There are some game weeks where there are teams that struggle, and there are teams that I think in general there's tricky game weeks coming up. I think game week 7 is the big one where it's not looking good for the majority of people's teams fixture-wise, I don't think. So you just kind of have to ignore that one. Outside of that, it looks really rather good. And for me, it's obviously the sacrifice you're making by owning those big 4 players is you have some cheaper defenders in here. But I think the bracket at 4.5 million is rather stacked, as I've said. And so I don't think it's an overall massive sacrifice. I would love to have maybe an Arsenal defender in there. Vardiols looked very attacking in pre-season again. Would like to have him in, but he's 6 million, so it's just not going to happen when we've got these 4 assets. I still think you are getting some very good players and some very good value out of these assets that you can see in the side right now. Even more so if people like Livramento do end up becoming options come game week 1. I'm not a massive fan of Konsa myself. He is just very popular. As I said, you can switch him out, put him in, find a good set of fixtures that work for you, that cover, 3 decent looking games every single game week, and there's your back 3 sorted for, however long you go before you likely early wildcard with this team. In midfield, we're going to have, of course, Salah and Palmer as those 2 players locked in. And then I've got Eze in as a nice little sweet thing as well. I think he's one that I don't want to go without come game week 1. He's been a very loyal FPL servant to me in the past. He's always been very good. And with Elise out, he'll be on penalties. Might hurt Palace as a whole, but I think Eze's performed well even with Elise out of the side. Very much the talisman of Crystal Palace, who ended last season very well. I think they're in line to start off this season as they left off last campaign too. So Eze's in here, so you're not sacrificing him. You do just have those 2 4th and 5th midfielder slots where it looks a bit weaker. But then we'll bring in the attackers just for the context around why going for Minter and Rodgers could be a good strategy. So we've got Haaland and Isak in there, of course. Not really going to touch on them or discuss owning them, but we'll talk about the overall strategy afterwards. Minter, Rodgers and Armstrong are another set of rotating players, and we'll see this as we move through here. So we've got Brighton, Aston Villa and Southampton, who rotate rather well. We've got Brereton Diaz, who's just signed for Southampton as I'm recording this video, has been announced as a 5.5 million midfielder. So you could always flip this around, still have a forward and a midfielder from those two teams, but have it the other way around, where you have Brereton Diaz as the midfielder at 5.5 and João Pedro as the striker at 5.5 million, but still have those two teams and still have the exact same rotation we've seen on screen here. I didn't have time to just update it. Maybe I'd prefer that strategy. I think Minter's risk of minutes maybe puts me more towards that side, especially if João Pedro is looking fit, ready and available for game week 1. So yeah, you have these three teams basically, and you have Rodgers in if he's starting. I think with the ownership levels here, you have some really nice differentials in here too, but it is an aggressive strategy that you're going to see over the first 4, 5, 6 game weeks, and then maybe wildcard afterwards. And so as much as you've got differentials in here, and there are other players who might be at the 6.5 million to 8.5 million range in midfield, or some other strikers like Watkins who might be able to hurt your rank, what you are doing with this team is you're covering all the 4 big players who I think will be very highly owned come game week 1. There is a bit of a split amongst people going no Salah, people going no Haaland, and people going no PALMER and no player in that kind of price bracket with Saka and all those. But with this, you get all 3 and Alexander Isak, who I think is essential and in the majority of teams right now. So that's what you do. You cover all those 4, whichever one of them starts off the season well, or whichever ones, I should say, start off the season well. You've got them in your team to cover the rank. It's unlikely you're going to end up, 3, 4, 5 million, maybe plus, come game week 3 or 4. And therefore, once you get to that wildcard point, which is probably going to come early for a lot of managers, I think, this season, game week 4, 5, 6, I think you're in a really strong position there. Or alternatively, if one asset gets injured long term or isn't performing, then you can take the funds out of that position and use it to upgrade elsewhere in your side. So say Palmer's looking really poor, and Nkunku at 6.5 million is starting well for Chelsea. You can save that 4 million there and immediately invest it into your defence, into upgrading Minter or Rodgers, even upgrading Armstrong up front. And the broad premise of this squad really is that it's easier to take funds out and upgrade elsewhere than it is to try and scramble up from Nkunku to Palmer if Nkunku gets injured game week 1, say. That's often a more difficult case, and it's a more difficult choice, and sometimes, if you've had that 4 million somewhere else in the team all spread around, it's not going to be a case of just 2 free transfers or just 1 free transfer and a hit. It can become a lot more complex, and so that's what you're kind of covering here. It's the same kind of argument for starting with Salah and Haaland in general, is that it's easier to start with them and cover than it is to try and bring them in and be scrambling for the funds in game week 2 or 3, taking hits when you don't want to because you went without one of them and they've started off the season really strongly. Now, the argument against this side and why you wouldn't go for it is that there are some strong differentials and strong alternatives, I should say, to the likes of Salah and Palmer. I'm a big Jota advocate, and maybe some of you guys aren't, but I do like the look of Diogo Jota. He's another one where he's had a long history of injuries in the past, but the comments from Slot make it sound like he'll start up front at the start of the season. So for 7.5 million, he looks really enticing for 5 whole million cheaper than Mohamed Salah. You've then got Nkunku, who we've already mentioned, as a Palmer alternative as well. And using those two in there as, I guess, I don't really like to use the term, but cover for those teams, so covering Liverpool and covering Chelsea, maybe allows you to have the funds to get maybe even Saka in instead of Minter and cover the Arsenal attack. So you get a more spread of teams, and you would have an Arsenal attacking asset in there if that's the way you like to do things, and make sure you've got one key asset in from each team. So whichever of the top side starts off really well, again, you've got some coverage there. So yeah, that's one argument that is putting me off this team a little bit. And obviously, with the defensive strategy, you're very much all in on the 4.5 millions. And if you do want to upgrade anywhere else, even just get the extra 0.5 million to try and upgrade somewhere, there's There's very few other areas in this team. Eze is the only one really where you'd be able to take any funds out, realistically speaking. There's maybe some other 5.0 million midfielders in Ahmad if he ends up starting, and 5.5, there is a very stacked bracket there, which I'd refer to and reinforce with Minter, is that you don't have to go for him. Fulham midfielders and Smith Rowe and Pereira work well in there. Then you've got other 5.5 million options. We've already talked about Brereton and Diaz as well, and there's some other ones too whose names are slipping my mind. But there are options in there. Hudson-Odoi and Nottingham Forest, that was the one I was thinking of. But yeah, let me know what you think of this overall strategy down below. But you know what? You're not going to comment that, i.e. it's going to take too much time to write it. I want you to guess what kit I'm wearing in today's video if you fancy leaving a comment down below to help me out with the algorithm. Not going to lie, it's just for that. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you did enjoy it. And thank you very much for tuning in and choosing to watch all the way through, as I don't post too much anymore here. But it's much appreciated, everyone who does choose to watch when I do. If you are new around here, then you like what you see and you'd like to see more of it when I do post videos, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, of course. And other than that, I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye, everyone. I'll see you soon.